Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world, this is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast, joined as usual by my able-bodied co-pilot on this magnificent flying machine. Awesome, you know him as Austin Ward. Awesome, Ward, strap in, man, and welcome again to the Tim May Podcast.
Let's go. Let's fly this bad boy.
That's right, man. We got a lot to talk about. We didn't have a week off, but we had a week to sit and watch football, baseball, U.S. men's national team. Caught you in color, you and your wife and your dad in living color post-game celebration on Thursday. Was that Thursday night or Friday night? I get the days mixed up anymore.
National team was Wednesday, Blue
right.
Jackets Thursday, Columbus Crew on Saturday. So it was a wonderful week of sports in Columbus, Ohio.
I was surprised you could even talk after cheering as loudly as you did and as long as you did and staying as long as you did after that U.S. men's national team victory. Who did they beat? Did they? What was that? What was the name of those guys? The cryogenics. No, who were those guys that were playing from Costa Rica?
The Ticos.
Oh yeah, the Ticos. I thought it was Costa Rican cryogenics. I mean, everybody on that team was 35 or older. I think it was like a senior. It was like watching a bunch of seniors play a bunch of juniors. I mean, it was the youngest starting lineup in U.S. men's national team's history, or something like that, right?
You know, Tim, there's just something going on around here right now with these youth movements because You had the U.S. playing the youngest roster I think that they've ever had in team program history against the old Costa Rica lineup. The next night when we go to the Jackets, it's the youngest lineup in the NHL. They go out and absolutely put one on Arizona. I did not see that coming for a season debut. Wow. And then sort of, makeshift lineup there for the Crew. But all this stuff that we talk about every single week with Ohio State and these young guys and the first-time starters, it's just, I guess I was well-conditioned. All right, well, the U.S. gave up a goal in the first minute. Hey, those young guys will be fine. They'll bounce back. You can't be too hard on them. They got to go through some growing pains. And lo and behold, they did and wound up with a big win. And so did the Jackets, obviously, on Thursday and Saturday night. So even without the Buckeyes playing, it was a fun week of sports, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit nauseous here, though, because it seems like my podcast is morphing off into a something about soccer, an elongated talk about soccer, and I got to steer this thing back onto the main part of the runway. But no, it was, man. I'm sure it was cool, and you're a big time fan. There's no doubt about it. And there's nothing wrong with rooting for your home team or your home country team. That's what I always say. Is that a good way of putting it?
Absolutely. And Allie and I have obviously followed them all over the world. Not just around here, but it's great when they're in the backyard. Columbus always shows up and shows out for those U.S. games. So the atmosphere was great. It was wonderful to be in that new stadium. And really, I know people are here to listen about college football, and we will, but it's fun to be in that arena district now with Blue Jackets playing at the same time on Saturday night as the Crew. Yeah. People out and about, and hope everything stays on the right trajectory so we can keep doing that. But it's really cool and fun to be down and part of that. And I hope that everyone got a welcome reminder that there's more sports than just Ohio State and Columbus. I know there was maybe some person on a certain network who wasn't quite sure of that last week, but this place has so much to offer. It was a great reminder of why I love living here.
Yeah. And it was a great reminder of, man, I'm kicking myself for not maybe taking an opportunity to buy into a partial ownership of a parking garage in that area way back when, but I digress. Hey, real quick, interesting weekend over the weekend, this past weekend, heading toward this weekend of like on the face of it, some dull college football games coming and stuff. But before we get into my conversation with my special guest this week, who happens to be Dimitrious Stanley, one of the stars of that 1996 Ohio State football team's Rose Bowl victory over Arizona State. By the way, you weren't around then, man. In fact, you might have still been in junior high for all I know. But no, I'm just messing with you. No, you might have been still in junior high now that I think about it. But that was right up there among victories, man. It had been such a drought since Ohio State had what you'd call a major win, and it was coming off such a major what do I want to call it? Disappointment. The Ohio State lost to Michigan that year, 13-14 13-9 when Ohio State couldn't score touchdowns after outscoring people like 100-0 seemingly halfway through that year. But Dimitrious Stanley, David Boston, Joe Germain, Stanley Jackson, all those guys put on a show in the Rose Bowl with a come from behind win and last minute win. But he's back to talk about that, but mainly to talk about these Ohio State receivers and this Ohio State offense, which, it really didn't lose its place among the elite in the college football world, the major college football world over the weekend, even though it didn't play. Isn't that right? Awesome. Yeah.
And I think it was to me, more than anything, watching the rest of the Big Ten or the teams that were in action on Saturday was a reminder of just how talented this roster really is. I mean, whatever the outcomes were, tight game for Michigan State, Iowa losing to Purdue, whatever. It wouldn't have mattered if Iowa had blown them out. I would have walked away thinking the same thing, that Ohio State's roster top to bottom, there's a reason they've won 4 straight Big Ten titles, and there's a reason why they're still heavily favored to win number 5 this year. They're built differently. The players that they've recruited, the way they've developed them, they are, to me, clearly the most talented team in the league. Now, the schedule is going to get harder. We're going to talk about that a lot. 6-week stretch coming, 7-week stretch coming. That will be a real test for a young team. But
yes,
you can't just watch. I thought Michigan State would be. I had changed my mind a little bit, and I ranked 1 through 6 last week at Lettermen Row what I thought were the toughest games left for Ohio State. I thought Michigan State would be that, and they may still be. I mean, Indiana is a good team, and that's in the primetime situation on Saturday night. We'll find out how they match up with the Buckeyes, but I don't think any of these teams the next 6 weeks are good enough to beat Ohio State, and they should be favored comfortably in all of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and even though the records maybe don't reflect it yet, I think the Ducks kind of got back in order, in the Big Ten and even nationally, and it's really funny because, man, this has been a crazy year so far, and I think it's only going to get crazier in some respects. But I'm trying to hold back because we're going to talk about a lot of this in the second segment after we get back from my interview with Dimitrious Stanley. But yeah, I thought it was an eye opener, and an eye opener can be also about. Wait a minute, I was thinking this, but no, I really should have still been thinking this, kind of thing. And I thought nationally and in the Big Ten, I experienced both of those. But Purdue pulling a Purdue, going in against the number 2 team in the country. We all know what Purdue did when Ohio State rolled over there several years ago to Purdue and upset the apple cart, and did the same thing to Iowa. Really beat Iowa as badly as they beat Ohio State that night. Agreed?
Yeah, considering the firepower of those respective offenses, the way that they did it, completely shutting them down is staggering. I don't think many of us projected that, but this happens once a year with Purdue, right? I mean, they're going to come up and get you at some point the second that you relax. And you look at Iowa's upcoming schedule, in hindsight, it looks like it was the perfect trap game, and it wound up being that.
Yeah.
I think it's heading into an off date, and then, Michigan's looming in a couple weeks. And, you feel for Iowa, right? Because seeing that happen to other programs, you can't take anything for granted. Now, the good thing for Ohio State maybe is that Purdue's already pulled that one upset. So maybe next month, Ohio State will be fine when they come to the Horseshoe.
Yeah, as Meatloaf said, you took the words right out of my mouth there with that observation. And, so the old saying goes, be careful for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. That's what Iowa, that Bell kid, they haven't covered him yet. It's crazy, man. It's college football can come down to, you can't cover this guy. You can't stop this guy. You can't stop the counter, right on down the line. Some teams just have a vulnerability, and definitely Purdue found it with Iowa and then got after it defensively. But, neither one of us were a real shot in the rear with Iowa's offense, even going into that game, right? Petrus, so we'll see if he gets any better, but an interesting quarterback situation there at Iowa too, because I'm not sure they have that big play, big time capability when they really need it. They don't have it at receiver either, do they? They got tight ends till tomorrow, but who's their big play receiver? I think a lot of things were exposed in that game.
Yeah, and I think that we saw that in the Penn State game, how hard it is to grind back with that offense. It's just not, if they're not going to get a flood of turnovers from their defense, well, that's going to create a really challenging sort of rock fight, and that didn't work out for them. And I think the other part is Michigan State. Like, I'm not sure who approved the storyline approach that Michigan State has the best wide receivers in the Big Ten in the Detroit Free Press last week, but
wow.
That was the first real start to finish opportunity that I'd had to watch them. And we'll have a direct comparison with a similar opponent in the same place 1 week apart. I still think Michigan State may be the most complete team that Ohio State will play. And that may sound crazy because we know how talented 1 through 85 Penn State is, maybe minus a quarterback or two, depending on what happens with Sean Clifford for next Saturday night. I don't have any insight on his injury status.
Yeah,
I'm not fully sold on Michigan for reasons that we've talked about not only this season but for years past. So I was pretty interested in Michigan State. I think that defense, I think Mel Tucker really has them playing well, and we know that they will always be ready for Ohio State. They'll come with a plan, and they will play tough for all 60 minutes. And I didn't see it from the passing game against Indiana the way I expected to. But they've got a really good tailback, and we've seen in other games for the Spartans that they can make some things happen with the passing attack. It didn't work against Indiana. So we'll see on Saturday night how different that might be if you get to use Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, which I think might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I was going to say the Detroit Free Press providing real bulletin board material, not made up. Bulletin board material, which we've also seen on the bulletin board a couple times when he snuck in there in the last few years, But
I can actually
real. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim, that I can actually guarantee, as we sit here right now, that story did make its way around the Woody Hayes Athletic Center last week. I have verified that information with someone who would have been very interested to read that story and whose picture might have been used as the position coach of the best unit in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Now your sources weren't the same as that guy that they exposed over the weekend, were they? I mean, no, I'm not going to get into that. You know what I'm talking about, but I digress.
Oh, anyone can guess who it might have been, but
yeah, no, I'm messing with you anyway. I'm talking about the source that had to do with national security kind of situations, but I digress. I heard that a guy said that a guy did this. Well, it's on the internet, Of course, that can get changed too, as you well know. The internet can get changed. We've seen that happen, haven't we? But that's another story for another day. I'm not even really into being an ombudsman for other people. But I digress. Hey, real quick, let's get into my conversation here with Dimitrious Stanley. Found him, as usual, like when I covered him way back in the mid-'90s, quite engaging. Here's a guy that was a hell of a football player, overshadowed, when he was there, maybe by Terry Glenn and then by David Boston, and as far as just the headlines go, but was a incredibly good college football wide receiver. It's funny. I was thinking about he and his dad were really, really great college football players who just didn't have that little difference it was to become big time NFL players, or pro football players. But when they were in college, they were quite capable. And his dad named Wayne Stanley. As I remind Demetrius, his dad basically saved the career, for one of another way of putting it, of Earl Bruce back at Iowa State way back when Iowa State was relevant, way back when. And before Earl Bruce was named the head coach at Ohio State back in 1979. And so in the mid-'70s, yes, Wayne Stanley came to the fore for Earl Bruce. But I digress again. Bottom line is we talk about a lot of things, including this is a guy that ran for, I think, city council one time in Columbus. He's also a young man who's battled he's 47, but he's battled cancer here recently, got some help from Buckeye Nation and others because, cancer bills, man, they just keep coming like waves from the ocean. And he found that out. And but is eternally grateful for the help he's gotten in that regard. But he's very insightful. I'm not sure I agree with everything he has to say about the Ohio State offense, the Ohio State receivers, but it's his right to have his opinions. And without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Dimitrious Stanley. Oh, my goodness. I'm looking over the middle. Who do I see? Dimitrious Stanley breaking wide open. Demetrius, here's my pass. Dimitrious Stanley, welcome to the Tim May podcast, man. First time. Hope it's not the last time. I mean, I can't believe I haven't had you on here as many of these as I've done. But I always say anybody comes on here is one of my favorites. But you're one of those guys, man. I mean, I've had probably 500 favorite guys I've covered at Ohio State, but you're one of my favorites only because you made your own road there to a certain extent. You played big in the big games, and now here you are. You're getting your shot on the Tim May podcast. How's that feel?
Yeah, it feels wonderful. Yeah, I've always followed you, always loved your work. So, and we go back, goodness, 20-something years. So, yeah. I appreciate you bringing me on.
We go back 30 years now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, you're on that downhill slide toward 50 right now, aren't you?
47 this past September, my friend.
Yeah, they move fast after that, man. You just got to pick up steam like a snowball. But I digress. Of course, your dad's one of my favorite people of all time, too, Wayne Stanley, the guy who single-handedly saved Earl Bruce's career at Iowa State and whatever. We'll get into that maybe in a little while. But, I've got you on, man. I prepped you with this. Saw you at our 97.1 The Fan tailgate show before that game with Maryland a couple of weeks ago. Who could mistake your smile for anybody other than Dimitrious Stanley? But I wanted to get your input, man. We're seeing a fleet of receivers at Ohio State like few I've ever seen. And I say that knowing that, in 1996, you were on a team with David Boston and D. Miller in that group. So maybe I am speaking a little bit out of turn, but this is a special group. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, not to mention Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. Am I correct?
Yeah, man. They have a lot of great receivers, and sometimes that can play against you. But so far, they've been able to distribute the ball well, get the ball to the appropriate player. And Jigba, Smith and Jigba, he seems to be coming on. He seems to be one of Stroud's guys. I'm starting to notice that. And I don't know if it's people are, checking out Chris Olave more and then Garrett Wilson more, but Smith and Jigba, he seems to be the guy that CJ Stroud is starting to like a lot. So, yeah, it's good in many ways to have such talent, but sometimes it could be a very interesting thing in how you distribute the ball, but they seem to be doing it very well right now.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, man, because Chris Olave, I'm pretty sure you probably met him. If you haven't, you will soon, I'm sure. But this guy is just so interesting to me in all kinds of ways. Number one of which has been his unselfish approach. He could have gone out for the draft last year and been drafted probably in the first round, definitely second round, and that's the leader of that room. I had Dane Sanzenbacher on talking about this a couple of weeks ago. When the leader of your room kind of sets that tone, that almost unselfish nature approach, that the only thing that matters to him is winning the game, it does a lot for the room, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it does. But I think in Olave's mind, and I'm just thinking as a receiver, watching his career unfold in front of us, he knows who he is. He understands what he is. He knows that where he wants to go, people know what he can do. He's had a great opportunity to show the world. And so, when you're mature, and he seems to be a very mature football player in his understanding of the game and the way he plays it, I just think it comes naturally to him because he's had the opportunity to show what he can do. And sometimes when you're in that position, you don't want to do too much in the first place because now, I showed what I can do. I still want to play ball and be one of the greatest at Ohio State. But at the same time, I don't want to get injured. I don't want to do anything that's going to hinder my opportunity of going to the next level. And it just seems like he's real comfortable in the role that he's playing right now. And I think he knows where he's going to be next year. He knows he has the attention that he needs. So I think it's easy for him to step back. CJ Stroud, new guy, different guy. Like I said, he seems to be liking Smith and Jigba a little bit because he's getting the ball a lot. And then Smith and Jigba's making the plays with the ball. So I just think Olave is comfortable in the position that he's in and where he's at right now. And I think that helps a lot when it comes to being unselfish. He knows that he's gotten his. He knows that he has an opportunity past this. So I think that plays a lot in it. But I'm just guessing on that just by the way he is. He carries himself on the sideline. You don't ever see him like upset that he's not getting the ball, or at least the camera doesn't show it. So he's just comfortable where he's at, man. I think he feels good about that position.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable where I was at too if I was him. I mean, just from, like you said, he's already got it on tape. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He has gotten everything that he needs to get to where he wants to be. So you know what? Spread the love, and the more other players are getting the ball, especially, that may open the end of the season up for him. You know, because now they're like, we can't target Olave. We got these two guys, and then maybe he'll come on stronger in the season because finally now they've taken the attention off of him. Because I guarantee you, these first few games, teams are looking at Chris Olave and saying, "Hey, we got to stop Chris Olave." And I'm figuring that's why some of the other guys are more open. But eventually, teams are going to have to balance that out, and then that's when Olave comes alive. Yeah.
Well, he did have 12 catches in one game this year, but then he had 0 in another because that team just said, "You're not throwing it to him." You know what I mean? But dude, Garrett Wilson, explain to people from a receiver standpoint, a former stellar receiver standpoint, which was you. We'll get into the Rose Bowl in a minute. But explain to people, when you watch this guy play, what comes to mind? I mean, I don't know if you need to compare him to somebody, but Garrett Wilson, the way he can just leap into the air out of nowhere, he just exudes, as I say, athletic ability. But what comes to your mind when I say Garrett Wilson?
Well, the style of play and being able to go up and get the ball, he reminds me a lot of Terry Glenn.
Yeah.
Terry Glenn was one of the most, and if anybody asks me, and people are shocked when I say this, if anybody ever asks me who's the greatest receiver to go through the Ohio State University, I always say Terry Glenn, because Terry had speed. He could run with the ball after the catch. The kid can jump to the moon to catch the ball. He could dive to catch, and he caught everything. And it's very rare that you get all of that in one package. And right now, I'm seeing that type of player in Garrett Wilson. Every now and then he'll drop one on you, but he will go up and make some magnificent plays. He's fast, and I think he's more of a ball carrier than Terry was. But I see a lot of that in him and his build and the way he plays the game. I see a lot of Terry in him. Absolutely.
Yeah. That you're exactly correct, man. And what just came to my mind, I got goosebumps. I'm thinking about that picture. I think we ran it in our paper when I was with the Dispatch a long time ago. But of him jumping to catch a ball at Penn State, and Joe Paterno's looking up at him, on the sideline, like his feet are almost as high as Joe Paterno's head. And I'm just going, if there's ever a picture that captured a young man and his ability, it's that guy. And I remind people, he originally was a walk-on at Ohio State, so, I mean, you're right. I mean, there have been, people have gotten to watch Ohio State, have been blessed by seeing the great receivers come through there. Somebody threw at me the other day, Paul Warfield, but I think Paul Warfield pretty much played running back when he was there because they hardly ever threw the ball back in the early 60s, but, from the middle of the 70s on, I mean, they had some great receivers go through there. I still say Chris Carter's the best I ever saw as a total package, only because he could do whatever you needed him to do at the drop of a hat, whether it was outrun somebody. He wasn't the fastest guy on the field, but he was sometimes, you know what I mean? And
it probably depends on, a lot of people never got to see Chris Carter that, are watching these guys today or got to watch Terry Glenn. Yeah. So and it could be a toss up. You could have Joey Galloway, you could have Terry Glenn, you could have Chris Carter, you could have Dave Boston, you could have D Miller. I mean, you could just throw it up in the air, and everybody, one of those guys was somebody's favorite, right?
Yes.
And they earn, and all of them earned that. But, for me, just understanding the game that I understand and seeing some of the plays that Terry did, and this all happened in 1 year. It wasn't like he played all these years and did all this. He came in 1 year and had the most fantastic season of any wide receiver that I ever saw, enough to make him one of the highest picks in the NFL draft. Yes. And coming from now he was a preferred walk-on, but yet still a walk-on. And so so when I look at Garrett Wilson, and I was just watching, I saw a picture of him the other day, and I don't remember who it was against, but Garrett Wilson's waist and his thighs were up by this DB's head. And I'm like, that's what reminded me of Terry Glenn. And so, so you could look at any across the board over the last 3 or 4 decades at Ohio State, and I'm sure everybody has one of those guys as their all-time favorite that they think were the all-time best. You know?
Oh yeah,
you can't go
exactly
wrong with either one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, Terry Glenn, a little hitch he ran against Notre Dame and turned it up and went the distance. I mean, you talk about setting Ohio Stadium on fire. That was
the moment for me. That play was the moment when I said, this dude is probably the realest dude I like. And I love his style of play. Yeah. And the thing about Terry that a lot of people didn't understand was his mentality. His mentality was so raw. It was so raw. Yeah. And he didn't have the training as a wide receiver. He was a raw football player that came in and did it at one of the highest levels for 1 year than I've ever seen in the game of football. And that Notre Dame play was the moment that put Terry at the top for me, because Chris Carter couldn't do that. Yeah, that's the thing, because the guy Rossum that he outran was the 60-meter Big Ten 60-meter champion in track. Yeah, and Terry went from a dead stop, broke out, and blew them all away. See, that's something like Joey could do that, but I don't think Chris Carter could do something like that. So
I watched Chris Carter do that exact thing, by the way, but this was at Iowa 1 year. And and it was a play nobody thought he could do, but he did. He caught a little hitch, turned, and went right the sideline, right sideline. But but Terry Glenn could do that at the snap of a drop of a hat. You know, and what the image I also had was him laying out for that pass in the Metrodome. Remember the Metrodome? Yep. I mean, that place should have been outlawed, you know. Yeah. And, of course, he hurt himself, and then he was never quite the same, you know, those last couple of games, especially against Michigan, which really hurt you guys, you know, in 95. And, of course, you know, 96, we'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, Jackson Smith-Njigba, you know, he is benefiting, like you said, from the attention the other two guys are getting. But in his own way, he is special too, right? I mean, I keep using this word smooth for a couple of these guys, but he is so smooth in the way he catches the ball, the way he turns and runs. He has deceptive. I think everybody knows he's fast, but he's deceptively fast. So just what's your take on him, man?
I love him because he's like me. You can tell when he catching the ball is one thing, but he wants to get those yards after the catch. And for me, when I look at a receiver, that's one of the top things that I look at, and I love that about him. And then he can catch the ball, make the appropriate moves, get to the open spaces and make plays. And that's why I really like him a lot. And that's what's caught my attention with him, not the way he catches, but he catches and then he gets those yards. And I love that. Yeah.
Hey, just think about Emeka Egbuka, that number 12, you know, the kid who had the big kickoff return the other day and stuff, has also had some good catches. They hadn't gotten to play. You know, just think if he'd gone to another school, you know, this guy was considered maybe the top receiver prospect in the country for 2021, you know, recruiting class. If he'd gone to another school, he'd be starting there probably. Same thing with Marvin Harrison Jr. You know, that's when I talk about the depth of that room. I'm looking at the guys who haven't even played much, you know, and because, like I said, y'all's room, man, in 96, that was a pretty decent wide receiver room. Agreed?
Yeah. Oh, I think it was one of the best, but that's just my personal opinion. But you know, one thing, but here's one thing that I've noticed, and it was happening in the first few games, and I think that's why we didn't look as good as we're looking now, is we have so much talent on the outside. We tried to be gunslingers the first few games instead of getting the ball, a solid run game going. And I think Henderson should be first and foremost the foundation of our offense. And I think having so much talent on the outside, it gets your eyes big and makes you want to take advantage of that. But we seem to, in the last couple games, to bring it back down a notch and give it to Henderson, because I love that kid. I love the way he runs the ball. And it seems to open up so much more. And ever since they started getting him the ball appropriately and how I think he deserves, Now everything's opening up and we're scoring points. We're putting a lot of points on the board. The first few games, we got away from that. And I think that's why it looked like we struggled so much. So, I love the idea that we have such great talent on the outside, but sometimes you can get greedy and try to just continue to take advantage of that when it should be the other way around. And it seems like we've come full circle to that, I think.
Yeah. Plus that offensive line is rocking and rolling, man. I mean, it's crazy. That's up there with any great offensive line I've covered at Ohio State. And there have been some really good ones, even when you were there. I remember joking with Eddie George, if Corey Stringer hadn't left for the NFL after the 94 season, he'd have had Orlando Pace on one end and Corey Stringer on the other end blocking. He might have had 3,000 yards and nobody'd be even coming close to his records. But but this is a pretty good collection of offensive linemen. I think you agree with me on that, don't you? This year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I absolutely do. I think they struggled a lot in the beginning, just because we seem to be so one-dimensional with the passing game. And, when teams start to understand that you're going to pass a lot, that's easy. That's easy to play defense against. But then when you all of a sudden start running the ball, because the offensive line looked very weak in the beginning, in my personal opinion. I mean, not weak, but they didn't look like an elite offensive line. But when you see what we were doing and we're just dropping a quarterback back in the pocket, he doesn't really have the running ability that we're used to at Ohio State. I think teams could pin their ears back and just go and get him and force him into some bad throws and get upfield. But now that they have to prepare for Henderson and they see him, I think that opens everything up for CJ Stroud, and it's going to open things up for the receivers. So they've definitely come a long way in these last couple games. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, talk to me about CJ Stroud though. What you've seen they gave him that week off, going into the Akron game. He didn't throw the football at all because clearly there was something a hitch in his get along as far as his throwing shoulder. His right shoulder, his right shoulder. He's come back. He's looked like a different player to me against Rutgers and against Maryland. I always thought he was pretty smooth and cool, but just in his approach, he looks so more on. I keep using this term, but I think it's accurate, more on point. You know what I mean? I mean, his passes are more on point. He's even run the ball a few times just to throw that out there, so to speak. But from your cultured observation or perspective, what's impressed you about him recently?
Well, let me start from the beginning. In the beginning, it's his first time starting the first few games and even the Oregon game. I think we put a lot on his shoulders, and we barely ran the ball, which when you're a quarterback and you're barely running the ball, that puts all the focus on you. He seemed very young in the beginning. It seems like he's matured a lot, like you said, over the last few weeks or so. He's matured. Something has calmed him down. He has a tendency to throw the ball high. But that's kind of gone away now recently. And I just think now he's comfortable. And I watched him after the Oregon game. I watched him run off the field, and I saw the camera, it kind of pan in on his face, and the disappointment and just I think he learned and he grew from that moment. And he had a look on his face to say, I'm never letting that happen again. And I think a lot of that made him grow up quick, because when you're at Ohio State, you're just losing, it's not a thing, right? And you're not used to that. And then as a quarterback, I felt like he felt that internally, and that is what drove him to become what he's become over the last few weeks. And I like the kid. A lot of people were hard on him. I don't see why. I mean, he's thrown for 400 yards, 500 yards. I mean, it's just Ohio State fans. We know you make a mistake, they get down on you. It just happens. But I think the kid he's the guy. He deserves to be in that starting position. Everybody, they're sitting him down and, they're going to play McCord. And I'm like, man, that means nothing. The kid has earned his spot on the field, and he's going to be the starting quarterback. And I think he's going to be a hell of a quarterback. And especially if they keep it balanced with Henderson and him making plays. The sky's the limit at that point.
I was going to say, he threw for 484 yards against Oregon and was disappointed because, number one, they lost the game. And number two, the offense got the ball back. As bad as the defense was playing that day, they did get the ball back for him with a couple of chances to even tie or maybe win the game. And then the offense, and it wasn't all CJ Stroud's fault by any stretch, but the offense couldn't get it done, as well as it had played at times in that game. And like you said, that first touchdown by Oregon in the second half when the kid went the distance made it a 14-point game. And I keep saying Ryan Day, I'm sure, was determined to come out and run the ball in the second half, but all of a sudden you're down 2 touchdowns. It, like you just pointed out, it threw your whole thinking out, your whole game plan out, and they started winging it and got into a throwing fest, and that's what it is. But
and that's where, and there was and I can't remember if we were going to the north. I feel like we were going to the north end. We were inside the 10-yard line, and it was like a 4th and 2, and we threw a pass.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it told me like we're not connected. Something's missing here. But we tried to do a complete West Coast wide open offense against a team who actually does West Coast offense all the time.
Yeah.
And a very experienced quarterback. I think he had transferred in from Boston College, I think it was. And he was very experienced. He was poised. You could tell the team followed him, and we tried to go back and forth with that. And CJ wasn't ready for that. I don't think we were ready for that. And every time we played Oregon in the past, we would always run it down their throat because naturally they recruit a little bit smaller but faster because they play wide open ball all the time. And so what we would do is we'd run it down, press on them. And then they'd play a run around with us for a while. And then about middle to third to fourth quarter, that's when they got tired. And that's when we started to take over the game. Well, we came out from the get-go and tried to sling it the whole time. And I think Oregon was good enough and had enough talent to take advantage of that. And then the defense wasn't, they weren't doing what we think they're capable of during that game. They were able to take advantage of some of the stuff, great play calling. I feel like that game specifically, the coaching lost that game because we had the talent. We were down and we were still competing, but there was some play calling that I just, when they had the run over on the left side, they had 3 touchdowns off of that play. Yeah. And we're down inside the 10-yard line in the red zone. We're at a 4th and 2, and we have Henderson in the backfield, and yet we throw a pass, right? And then we don't complete it, and we turn the ball over. So there was a lot of that, but I think that game is where CJ Stroud made a decision, and it's matured him pretty quick because to lose in the horseshoe, especially at home, early in the season, man, that has to hurt your heart so bad. So he's come a long way. I think he's earned that position.
Wow. Good stuff, Demetrius. Let's talk about losing in the horseshoe. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking.
We don't want that juju out there.
But I want to tell you something, man. That 96 team reminds me a lot of this. There are a lot of parallels you can draw to different teams, but you guys had lost Eddie George, you lost Bobby Hoying, Ricky Dudley, Terry Glenn. A lot of line. You still had Orlando Paceback, still the best offensive lineman I've ever seen, and especially in college football. But right on down the line, you revamped defense to a certain extent, in the secondary especially. And all of a sudden in 96, you guys are sitting there, in my opinion, the best team in the country going into that last regular season game, of course, against Michigan. And John Cooper, y'all had brand new starting quarterback in Stanley Jackson, but then you played Joe Germain some too. Just will you ever get over that loss? And then we'll talk about redemption and 5 weeks later. But will you ever get over that loss and the significance of it in the pre-playoff era?
Well, never in my life. One, out of the 4, I only got 1 pair of gold pants. So that stings as it is.
Yeah.
Then we have a national championship on the line, and we lose to a team that shouldn't have even been on the field with us. Yeah. So the Michigan thing really stings me, and then that especially. And I'll tell you a story. So we went into, we have practice on Sundays after the game, and I remember. And it was either Sunday or Monday. We went in the locker room, and you go in the locker room, and everybody converges to the dry erase board in the middle because there's the depth charts, right? So I remember going in there and we went to look at the board to see a depth chart. I was pretty sure I had my spot, but you just want to see what it all looks like.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'll never forget this. We went in and looked at the board and it said Joe Germain as the starter.
Yeah.
And at that moment, you started hearing rumbles, you whispering, and as good as Joe Germain is and was, that was the worst time you could ever change a starting quarterback. One, we were 10-0 with Stanley Jackson starting. Regardless of how you if you wanted to start him and then bring Joe in immediately, whatever. It was the moment I went home and I told my mom, my parents, I said, and I sat on the chair and they were sitting on the couch. I said, we're going to lose this game. They said, you can't talk like that. You got to be positive. I said, I know what just happened. And I don't think a lot of people understand it, but see, we were all emotionally connected to Stanley Jackson because we came in together. Yeah. And I love Joe Germain. Joe Germain made me look good on many occasions, but it was the energy that happened at that moment. And you don't take a quarterback who hasn't started and start him in a national championship implication team or game. Yeah. And there was some passes. Like there was a play, I ran a fake hook route and I ran to the corner. The DB falls down, Woodson falls down. I'm standing wide open. Now, Joe Germain goes back, but he's got hot feet because he's in this high pressure game for the first time, starting in the first time in his career at Ohio State. And he just throws the ball backside and misses Dave Boston. I don't blame him for that. I blame the coaches for putting him in that position and it turned out in that game, Stanley Jackson's ability was exactly what we needed. Yeah. He was what we needed because the pass game wasn't working very well in the beginning of the game. But one, you're putting Joe Germain under this pressure. It's his first time starting. Michigan's coming. They're going to give us everything they got. And so, that's when I knew things were going to go wrong in that game when they started Joe Germain over Stanley Jackson. And I'll tell you this, I couldn't believe it, but I'd been talking about that for 20 years. Yeah. And when Cooper came out and said that was one of the biggest mistakes of his career, I was like, oh my goodness. I'm so glad he said that because I thought that was a bad decision. Coop knew what he was doing. He was a great delegator, but that one moment, I think, defines his career, and that was his national championship opportunity right there.
Dude, do you know if Twitter had been around that year or social media had been around, though, the fire, the wildfire that had been going on for Joe Germain to be the starter as that season went on, because people – and I had Joe Germain on my podcast back in the summer. He's one of my favorite people ever, too. Joe. He's one of the great guys you're ever going to meet. So low key, et cetera. Great guy, great quarterback. But the fire that was going on then by the public and the fans, they wanted Joe Germain to be the starter. If you remember, middle of the year on, because he was in their minds perceived as the better passer. And that lit everybody up. You had these great receivers out there and stuff. And, you remember those games earlier that year, man, you guys just tore people up. And
it's easier. It's much easier to come off the bench and be a great quarterback, right? Because there's no pressure on you. Well, not only that, Demetrius, but that's what I wanted to make people understand. Stanley Jackson started every game that year. And then I think he started the Rose Bowl, if I remember correctly, correct? Yeah. And produced in that game. But the point was, you just pointed out a minute ago, it messed up the chemistry that you guys, there was something special there. You had this one guy, and then all of a sudden it's like bringing in a relief pitcher who's throwing a different pitch than the other guy, and it threw people off all year, and instead you guys get 3 field goals in the first half instead of touchdowns, and don't score in the second half and 13-9. But go ahead. I mean, I want to make people understand who maybe, don't look past 2015, Stan there was an emotional attachment to him. And that's what I think the coaches discounted, and I talked to Stanley about this, and he said he saw something like that coming at some point. He saw that. But I think everybody discounted that the team that was on that field was emotionally connected to Stan. They discounted that aspect of it. And that's the part, that's why I believe they truly made that decision, because we're 10-0 with Stanley Jackson as our starting quarterback, right?
Yes.
And you go to the Michigan game. So we were having we'd get down in the red zone, but then we were having a tough time completing.
Yeah.
Well, that's where Stanley Jackson comes in, makes some plays with his feet, gets the team up, get excited, get some first downs with his feet. Then that opens up a whole bunch of other stuff, because now, the defensive backs have to now look to see, make sure he's not running. Then when they're doing that, now we can be doing our routes and things like that. I just think, that whole thing, it's easy to be a great quarterback coming off the bench. There's no pressure on you. You just walk in there. Nobody expects you to do anything like amazing. You know what I'm saying? Because you're a second string.
Yeah.
But then once you're now that starter, that's a whole different ballgame mentally. And I just think a lot of that stuff played into that game, and the coaches discounted a lot of the mental and the psychological aspect of what that decision was going to do in the time frame that they did it.
You guys bounce back. You win the Rose Bowl, over Arizona State. A really good Arizona State team with Jake the Snake Plummer.
Yeah.
And really good defensive players. Don't spend a lot of time on this, but just tell me, what do you remember? Because obviously Stanley started that game, had a really good touchdown pass in the first half in that game over to the side, over the sideline and stuff, to the corner and stuff. But what do you remember as that game went on? What just stands out most about it? The comeback or the drive? Obviously, you can't forget the drive, but the way y'all started, was that the start of the second half when Joe hit you down the middle on that post route? But go ahead now. Well,
yeah, there's a story behind that as well that a lot of people don't know. And so all year we ran on third downs, we ran either a 12-yard hook in, we ran a 10-yard out, or a 15-yard out, right? On third down. We did that all year. So the entire first half, they were sitting on our outside short routes. They were sitting on it. And I kept telling the coaches, I said, Coach, throw me the ball across the middle, I'll score. Throw me the ball across the middle. I told Hollis, I told Coop, I told my position coach, and I kept telling them, but they didn't listen to me. And so finally we go in at halftime, and we're kind of struggling on the field. And I said, and Coach Harris comes down, and I said, Coach Harris, they're playing our outside routes on third down. Throw me the ball across the middle and I'll score. So we come out third quarter. They throw me a dig route in the middle. I catch it for a first down. Second play, I line up on the short side of the field and I run a post route across the middle. I catch it and I score. 72 yards, right?
Yeah.
And I go to the sideline and the phone rings and it's Coach Harris, says, congratulations, you just called your first touchdown. Believe it or not, we never did it again.
Yeah. Well,
I know. And
hey, they're going to be waiting for it the next time. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were waiting everything. They were sitting because they knew obviously did a lot of great film research and they knew what we were going to do. But that's one of the moments that stands out for me personally. But it was just the calm in that last drive and the huddle. And it didn't seem like we only had a minute 19, I think it was, left to score a touchdown. It was almost like we're still in the game. Joe was calm. Everybody was like, all right, fellas, let's go do this. Went out there and we did our thing, and that's what, and it was just the connection of the team and the understanding. There was not a lot of rah-rah screaming in the huddle. It was just get in there and let's make some plays. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah. What I'll never forget also, we talked about this the other day when you dropped by the tailgate set, was they were holding you guys all night. You receivers, I mean, grabbing you, whatever it took, and no flags were being thrown. And then suddenly on that last drive, I think did you draw 2 pass interference calls?
Yeah, I got 2 pass interference and 3 third down, first down catches.
Exactly. Other than that, you didn't do much, right? No, I'm just joking.
Right.
And then, of course, on the play that everyone, as history books say, it doesn't matter if you don't score the touchdown, Joe looks up, hits David Boston's wide open on the right out there. but you were wide open. You had a little, like, I want to call it a little lazy post or whatever, right into the, I think in the middle of, either one of you guys could have scored the winning touchdown. Go ahead.
Well, the interesting part about that is I think by that point, they were focused on me. So I was in the slot. Dave was on the outside. Yeah. And I ran out and I ran inside, kept the defense, the safety in, and I kind of curled outside because I was sitting down in the hole because they were shutting it off on the inside. Well, the corner, he was trying to play me going to the corner. And then Dave ran a little in and back out route, and they literally just left him standing there. So I think, with all the catches and everything I was doing, they more focused on me because you could watch the defensive back, and it was number 23. He goes in with Dave, but then all of a sudden he backs up in a hurry. And I think because he wanted to protect the corner route, and then that just left Dave wide open in the flat, throws it to Dave. Dave scored. Game over.
But I swear I've watched video of that a million times too. I swear Joe could have thrown it to you too, because you weren't exactly tightly covered on that play either. But you know what I mean. It's kind of like a running back who takes the ball down to the 5-yard line, and then they send the fullback in to get the touchdown. You know what I mean? That's right. Why I kind of felt for you a little bit now. But dude, you remember the euphoria you guys felt after that win. That's what I wanted to touch on. Modern football now, if you don't make the playoffs, your season has been, at least at Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, some of these big time programs now, your season's almost looked at in some respects as, mediocre and or a failure, even though you've had you guys that was almost the last gasp for what traditional football was all about, was win the Big Ten, go to the Rose Bowl, win the Rose Bowl, which is what y'all did, despite the loss to Michigan, which was, y'all will replay the rest of your lives. But you felt pretty damn good after that game, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Because it was redemption. You lost 3 games of your 4 to Michigan. You lose to Michigan when you have national championship implications. Yeah. Now you have, but at least you're ending it with the Rose Bowl. And it was that moment that you could redeem, that loss to Michigan. And when we did that, that just kind of wiped the Michigan deal away. I think that got Coop some more years on his contract. Yeah. I think there was a euphoria about that win because, at that point, that was the ultimate of the Big Ten. That was the ultimate game to play in. And quite honestly, I like that concept because you have 11 games to prove your point, right? And one loss may keep you out. Yeah. And then you have the bowl games to kind of work everything out and determine it. Now you have the playoffs. Well, the lesser team of the two can come in, hit a hot streak, and boom, win the championship. I don't like that concept. I like and that's why I liked it the way we played the games. And I loved that the Rose Bowl was the ultimate. Now, when you watch the Rose Bowl, it just doesn't feel the same, doesn't have the same meaning. And, they used to call it the granddaddy of them all. That's all gone now. And I know things change over time, but I think they're doing a disservice to college football by doing the playoff system, because now you're getting into doing the same thing the NFL is doing. And it was great that you separated the two. Yeah. And I like that. But now all we're becoming is a amateur league professional football league. And I think that takes away from, that's why fans, they don't get as excited the whole game or all year, because you don't make the playoffs, then it's like they don't care. Well, when you're playing and the way we played and the way it was set up, the way we played, it was like excitement every week, because you knew if you lost one game, you're pretty much out of it. You don't have a chance to make that back up. And I love that. I love that feeling.
I was going to say, man, you guys beat Notre Dame 2 years in a row. Y'all hadn't played since the mid-30s. Y'all set the record. You even the record with those guys. You win the Rose Bowl and stuff. You played with a Heisman Trophy winner, in Eddie George. That was a pretty good stay at Ohio State for you, wasn't it?
No, man, it is a blessing that still gives to me today, my friend. Yeah. And, the one great thing about it is like through my life, you don't know the people that remember you, but you feel like they didn't really appreciate you much when you were there, but the appreciation I've gotten over the last 20, 25 years, because one, the Big Ten network has come around, and you have it was the Elite, I think it was the Elite something show they did on the Big Ten, and they covered the 96 team. And people are getting a chance to like really see like, oh my God, Demetrius was really doing a lot of good stuff out there on the field. And, all the big names got all the attention, and the little guy like me who's making the big plays, they don't notice because I don't have the big name. And I've got that is given back to me for 25 years of my life. I get speeches from what I did back then. People want to still get my autograph. They still want to talk to me about it. So it's playing at Ohio State was the greatest decision I've ever made in my life. I'll tell you.
Hey, I tell you what, man, and some people know this, maybe some don't. You've had a little battle, going on with prostate cancer, was diagnosed a couple of years ago. And, I think there was a GoFundMe page that started last year because really helped you out in some tough times. I mean, because like you said, you don't know the half of it when you get a serious illness. A lot of people don't, about the bills that just keep coming in, even though you have health insurance. That sometimes doesn't even cover half of it. But you've been blessed in that regard too, of finding out people do care about you, right?
Yeah, man. People raised $75,000 for me and my family, and I can't even say thank you enough for that, because it's helped tremendously with the bills and taking the pressure off, because insurance covers a portion, but when you have a disease like cancer, the type of things you have to do are, it could be $60,000 and they pay a percentage of that, and you still are responsible for the other percentage of that. And it adds up quickly. So the community stepped up, and like I said, because I played at Ohio State and people knew me from that and they appreciated me, they stepped up. So, Ohio State keeps giving to me, man. And I think this community, and that's why I love this community. That's why I didn't move away. I did a couple times, but I always came back because this is home, man. This is home.
Hey, Tyson Gentry stepped up and helped you. I mean, there's a guy that talk about giving it your all, walk-on receiver who was paralyzed in a practice accident. And he's one of the guys that helped get that GoFundMe page going. But, the brotherhood is real, isn't it?
Yeah, man. It doesn't matter, how long it's been. It's like you never miss a step, because, you go through, at that time in your life, you go through hell, but you go through it because you love the sport, right?
Yeah.
And, you saw people in their weakest moments. You saw people in their proudest moments. You saw people that went through family issues. You saw the rawest of every human being in that locker room at some point. And when you see people in that sense, like, there's always a connection, because both of you went through the same thing at the same exact time, and you pulled each other through. And one of the fortunate things about us is we won so much, right?
Yeah.
So that just makes it so much more powerful, with going through all that and it all turning into a lot of success. And so it makes you happy when you see people again. Like, we just had the 25th anniversary of the Rose Bowl. And that moment when you see the guys, it's like it's the same. Everybody starts cracking jokes on each other, and it just doesn't change, man. And so I think that's what it is. You just go through so much. You got to think, we would lift weights, we would go to class, we would do conditioning, and then we would run or practice all in a day, right? Average human being would die. But we did that regularly, willingly, And then when you're doing conditioning in the summer with everybody, and people throwing up, people falling out on the ground, people picking each other up, it's like, we got a couple more, let's go, man, there's nothing that can connect you better. Well, there's some things I can think that connect, but not a lot that can connect better than that. Yeah, not a lot.
Dude, you guys ought to get your little name, image, and likeness thing going. Imagine.
I tell you what, man, I like the fact that they're doing that now, but I think they're doing it wrong. And that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. In what respect? Just give me why you think that, Demetrius?
I think there's something very important about being poor and learning how to survive in college. Because people think because we play football that we're not living this extravagant life. Now, you learn how to work and, make a couple bucks here and there, but there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
And the way I personally would do it, if I was the university, I would set up a trust. And when you get recruited, you come to Ohio State, you automatically get $250 going into your trust. If you are Eddie George and you're getting jersey sales, you get a certain percentage. I'd put it in a trust, because I think handing kids a lot of money at that age, one, drug addiction, alcoholism, you'll be broke by the end time you leave college because you don't have any financial background. So you put it in this trust, and when you leave, you get this money to go off and start your life. And a lot of times kids' families were poor, so they would have problems at home. So you set up a board and you go to the board and say, hey, I'd like to take out some money for A, B, and C. My family's struggling. They let you do that. And they base it off of how much you give to the program. I don't think it's good to just hand young kids in that position a lot of money, because that's only going to lead to one bad place. And the worst is an addiction that could lead to death, or you just start out broke when you leave college. The idea to do it, in my personal opinion, is to make sure you don't leave college broke. I don't think they're looking at it in that sense. And then here's one for you. So you have yours that comes from Texas, right?
Yeah.
He gets $1 million deal, right?
Yeah.
He's sitting on the bench in the third string. So now you have these people throwing money at this guy. Then you go in the locker room and people throwing money. They're going to expect some return on that money, because I'm sure some of that money had something to do with him deciding to come to Ohio State. What kind of pressure is that going to start putting in the locker room to maybe get this guy out on the field when you have a guy who's a stud like a CJ Stroud? I think it's going to – I'm glad they finally did it. I just think they're going about it the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, that's because, the schools and the NCAA never got around, and the schools are the NCAA, by the way, never got around to figuring out how to give people a decent stipend, you know what I mean? Because, and so what happened here is now third parties are doing it. So they're off the hook for that, at least for a while, you know what I mean? Of having to, quote, pay players to put money into a trust fund. I came up with that idea a long time ago. I said $5,000 a year, minimum for each scholarship player. And, if you the number of years you stay there, the thing grows, et cetera. You get that when you leave. And like you said, except maybe you need a hardship thing or something like that. But that was I put that forth like 25, 30 years ago, and could have avoided maybe a lot of the problems they've run into here recently. But you're right. This coming spring is going to be an important spring for Ohio State football and a lot of other schools. You know why?
Why is that? Because
April 15th will be coming around. You better have your tax returns in order. You know what I mean? When they say availability, we get that availability list, they never delineate why guys are missing from games, but could be tax problems for some, if they don't take care of their knitting, correct?
Right on. And that's the thing. There's so much. There's good that can come from it, but I think in the way it's being done, there's so much bad that can come from it. And I feel like it should be their responsibility to protect these young men from those mistakes, and they're not. And because here's the thing, you have players that go to the NFL or NBA make $100 million over their tenure and yet still broke, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things of setting up a trust would help them have to learn, okay, what is a trust? How does it work? How does it work with taxes? Because, having a trust helps a lot with taxes.
Yeah.
And I think doing that will educate them on the financial aspect of it, which is where I think they should spend more time now, which of course they're probably not going to do that.
Well, Ohio State's done a pretty good job of educating these guys. I mean, they saw this coming, but you're right. They're still neophytes, most of these players, but go ahead. You're right.
Yeah, no, I just think they're doing it hastily because maybe pressure or whatever the case may be. But they're not really going to give it the best chance to be as successful as it can be, because I think the amount of problems that are going to come by handing young men, 18, 19-year-old young men who've never, and a lot of them come from a poor background, and that's why they're so successful in football. And you're just going to start handing them money. well, you're just going to exacerbate the problems that they already have. And I just feel like they're doing it hastily and not going about it the right way. Why would you give a guy who's coming to Ohio State $1 million contract when he's not even on the field? And then what's that going to do when these guys are pouring this money in this kid? All of a sudden now he's not playing, and then you now want the coaches to play him or the athletic director. And then all of a sudden you maybe say, well, the kid's not playing, so we're not going to pull this from this. Like it just. It's just not done right. I think it's done hastily, and I don't know if it's going to end the best way for the players.
Well, the problem, the reason it reached this point, I do believe the next couple of 3 years before it settles down, because if you're not getting a return from your investment, if your businesses, you got to show that you've backed this guy. This guy's going to help your bottom line. You know what I mean? Down the road. I mean, it's all got to settle out. But the problem is the NCAA just kept kicking the can down the road till finally state governments stepped in and passed laws that gave these guys these rights. The federal government still hasn't done that, but that's what happened. You were going to, if the NCAA hadn't finally opened up in the late summer and pretty much said, okay, you can do this. Well, you're going to have some schools that are going to be able to do it and others that weren't, but depending on the state you were in. And as you know, Ohio got an executive order from the governor DeWine to make it possible, because all those other states were kicking in, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, right on down the line. And you're right. I mean, it's kind of like a hurricane's coming. Okay, I'm going to get in my car right now, right as it's coming ashore, and I'm going to try to get out of here. Too late. Yeah. Too late. The hurricane has hit. But
that's what it looks like to me. That's the feeling I'm getting, at least.
But I think you could have worked out an NIL deal back in 96, 95, man. You got that personality going for you. Could have been
easy. I could have done too. Trust me, I had plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, you and Orlando Pace could have had some kind of car deal or something. He gets a big truck, you get a sports car.
Yeah, trust me, I could have done that, but I didn't want to lose my career. So
there you go.
I didn't do it.
Dimitrious Stanley, man, appreciate you, my man. And, look for my email. I may be calling on you again shortly. But thanks for joining the Tim May podcast for the first time, but not the last time.
All right, brother. Well, just let me know.
So I always liked about Dimitrious Stanley. He always had an opinion on things. Awesome. And it was great to have him on the Tim May podcast. I kept talking to these guys. I mean, C. Grant's one of my favorite guys. I mean, Dimitrious Stanley, all these guys, they weren't afraid to give you their opinion. They're still not afraid to give you their opinion on things. And that's what makes the world go around, correct?
And I think there's so much pride about this is true for other programs, of course, but Ohio State has won at such a high level. So many guys have been part of building and maintaining both that rich tradition. And so they feel, a certain way, a powerful way about it, and want to see that continued. We know that for all the guys that are regularly on Lettermen Live or Weekend Kickoff or come on your podcast, it comes for them. It comes from a place of both knowledge and emotion, which is great. I mean, I think that speaks a lot when they're able to communicate that directly to the fans and people that supported them. I mean, they have as powerful of opinions as anybody, and it comes from a unique perspective. We say that every week, I guess, but it's certainly true.
Yeah, and as I keep reminding people, those mid-'90s, Ohio State teams under John Cooper, they didn't beat Michigan as often as they would like. As I think Demetrius even said, he only has one pair of gold pants. But the bottom line is they did get this team back into that national spotlight big time. They were in the running for the national championship from 95 through 98 in some form or fashion. 98, of course, being the first year the BCS came out. BCS started, and Ohio State, of course, got upset by Michigan State that year, and Nick Saban, and did make the first BCS national championship game. But you can still argue that might have been the best team in the country. But the bottom line is that was the group that really got this ball rolling from like 94 till now. Ohio State football has been on a different level, I do believe, even compared to other teams in the Big Ten. There was that little last gasp, from Michigan, 97 through about 2006 or 7, but then it fell off. And Ohio State has really carried the Big Ten banner since then, hasn't it? Don't you agree?
Unquestionably. I mean, there's just nobody that's close, honestly. I mean, Wisconsin has maybe shouldered a lot of the load on the West, and has certainly given Ohio State some games. It's been that matchup a few times in Indianapolis, but I mean,
and Michigan State, Michigan State a couple of years,
State had one title that they had some fortuitous circumstances that worked out for them, and hey, you can't take that away. They put up that championship, and James Franklin has one, but in terms of winning at a really high level and competing nationally, there is no second place here. I mean, it's Ohio State and then the rest of the league underneath them right now.
Yeah, and like we talked about before, my interview with Dimitrious Stanley, that became even clearer, I think, to folks who watched games over the weekend who maybe didn't get to study the Big Ten as much as you and I do, that in fact there is still, just on paper and just in perception, that gap there between Ohio State and everybody else. Like you said, just when you're ready to think Michigan State is that team, that's going to challenge them, the way Mel Tucker complete makeover of that team. And when you look at the transfer portal and how you mined that for like 13, 14, 15 guys over the offseason and some JUCO guys, et cetera. But, watching them against Indiana, struggle against Indiana without a pick six, they don't win that game probably at Indiana. Just watch him struggle offensively. See Kenneth Walker Jr., who had been ordained as maybe a Heisman front runner, or at least one in top three, be held to 83 yards on 24 carries by that Indiana defense. I put this forth on Wall-to-Wall Sports the other night with my buddy Dom Taberry, that I think this Indiana defense to date is going to be the toughest defense Ohio State has faced thus far. And that's taking into account Oregon. I keep reminding people, Oregon won 35-28, but Oregon gave up over 600 yards offense to Ohio State. You can't call that the best defense Ohio State has faced or will face. But what you saw of Indiana over the weekend, would you agree with me on that?
I think you're probably going to be right about that.
I'm talking about up till now.
Minnesota was an interesting challenge, I think, for Ohio State with a bunch of veteran players. Maybe that's the situation that we're talking about, to your point. Yeah. Those first 6 games, and really it's hard to see any defense that is going to have the capability of slowing down this Ohio State offense. But the thing that resonates with me about this Indiana defense is the way Tom Allen, he's got no conscience when it comes to blitzing, and it will come from all angles. I think you wrote about it going into that game last year. Yeah. And Justin Fields, it was a boom or bust situation. You look, they scored a lot of points, and he picked them apart at times. And then he also forced some stuff or got a blitz that they weren't expecting and made a couple mistakes. From that perspective, that's what really, to me, the knowledge of what they may do, the fact that Ohio State will probably definitely CJ Stroud will see some things that he hasn't before. I don't think that you line them all up that Indiana, in terms of their personnel, is the most talented defense they'll face. Maybe it is for the first 7 weeks. I don't know, but I think that they'll probably, with the way that they'll throw stuff at Stroud, with night game, all this other stuff, this is an opportunity to really learn a lot about CJ Stroud and Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, the offensive line, that whole deal, because there's going to be challenges and new stuff that they haven't faced. And still, because of what you said, Maryland was not going to pose these problems. Rutgers plays really hard, doesn't have anything anywhere near the personnel to do it. Akron, obviously not the same. So I think you're probably onto something. I don't know if you line them up on paper if I'd say Indiana's the best, but I know that the kind of challenge they'll bring is going to be one that Ohio State hasn't faced yet, in my opinion.
Yeah, and by the best, I'm not talking about the most talented. I just like the way they play defense. I like the way they get after it. And man, Michigan State's big problem on this past Saturday, but they escaped with a win. But second and third and long, against a defense that likes to blitz like Indiana does. That's where the way Indiana, the job it did on first and second downs, especially, was really telling in that game. And boy, when you get a team predictable and it's going to throw the ball, and then you can throw the kitchen sink at them, you just don't know which bathroom the sink is, or excuse me, the bathroom sink at them. You just don't know which sink the bathroom's coming from in a multiple. Why am I getting all screwed up on this analogy? Awesome. That's what I'm worried about. But, you got a multi-bathroom home. You don't know what sink is coming from. There we go.
There it is. All right.
But it still stunk. pardon the expression. But that's where if they can get you in a predictable situation defensively, they can really create havoc. And, we talked about Chris Olave and CJ Stroud, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Garrett Wilson et al. But really, it's going to come down to the offensive line. This veteran offensive line for Ohio State picking things up and giving CJ Stroud that time. But that's not to say that Ohio State can't line up and just run the ball down their throat, which I personally, that's what I expect Ohio State to try to do.
Yeah. Look, teams have to pick before they play Ohio State.
Yeah.
We've seen this. I was talking to somebody else about this the other night, and the way Ohio State's offense is progressing and how it looks and how they will play teams. Like the times that they've struggled, I put that maybe in air quotes here, they were too slow when Northwestern said, you know what, Justin Fields is not going to throw in this game. You're not going to beat us through the air. And it took them a half before they're like, oh, well, Northwestern wants Trey Sermon to run for a first down every time he touches it. Maybe we should take that.
Yeah.
And the same happened this year to some extent. Now, there were different circumstances with CJ Stroud's shoulder at that point, but Tulsa said, we're going to drop 8, and you're going to see some funky pass coverages. They're not going to let Ohio State win through the air. And then, well, what happened in that one, Tim?
Yeah.
I think another record-setting performance. TreVeyon Henderson is just going to go get a first down every time he touches it.
Yeah.
Teams
poor Archie, but go ahead now.
Exactly. And I think he'll probably forgive TreVeyon for that.
Yes.
He at least got to see that ball. But that's the situation. Like, Maryland made a conscious effort, in my opinion, to take away TreVeyon Henderson in the rushing attack before the off date. And in the first half, they largely did that. But at what cost? They got sliced up by those 3 receivers and CJ Stroud. Teams, I don't think there's a way to build a defense. Maybe if Ohio State plays Georgia, we'll get to put this to the test. But I don't think you can construct a defense that takes away everything Ohio State can do. You've made this point a number of times, a historically talented offense.
Yeah.
And certainly I think the potential to be the best one in school history for Ohio State. And I don't know, Indiana's just going to have to flip a coin and decide what way they want to do it. And it may well be a game on Saturday night where TreVeyon Henderson just gets to run wild behind that offensive line. I don't know what they'll pick. I think as aggressive as Indiana wants to be, that they're going to be susceptible to some passes because that offensive line, I think, is veteran and skilled enough to pick up a lot of those crazy extra pressure packages that Indiana might have. I don't know. But whatever they pick, they're going to get beat by the other thing.
Yeah, I agree. And Ohio State's blitz control when it comes to their passing game also is going, with CJ Stroud now with 5 games under his belt, being a starter, sat out 1 game, obviously, to let that shoulder receive its supernatural healing. We got to get to talk to him again because I got to ask him that question. What was that? Was it a bolt of lightning? Was it, an MRI that hit home? I mean, what was it? But I digress.
Pair of guns that Colin Morikawa is using.
Yeah. Maybe it was one of those massage things where those massage things where the things on you can go like that and do your back. It's a back scratcher massager. Maybe it was one of those things.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, but that will be the game that will be the game within the game because I really think Ohio State defensively is set up to play these guys. What also didn't impress you was Indiana offensively with Chris Olave's former quarterback Tuttle throwing the ball. That was kind of hard to watch it at times. They did muster 15 points, but that's Chris Olave's former quarterback back in high school back in California. But so we'll see if this Ohio State defense, young defense, like you talked about youth, man, about that U.S. men's national team. We're watching one of the younger Ohio State defenses in history, rise in front of our eyes. And I just want to get your take on this. I was thinking about this as we were talking. What do you think is where can a defense get better in an off week, in a rest time in an off week? Obviously, the obvious thing would be to say, well, did Haskell Garrett, get well enough to play? I would think if they're smart, Haskell Garrett probably doesn't play till Pittsburgh, till Ohio State plays Penn State in prime time in Ohio Stadium on next weekend. But just your take, where do you think a defense can get better in an off week?
Yeah, you definitely cut my legs out there because it's not just Haskell Garrett, Tyreek Smith, and Cameron Brown as well. You add those back in, that Ohio State defense gets more veteran and maybe more aggressive and much better. But just another week of competitive practices for this linebacker group in particular. I don't think there was probably a ton of, hey, go at it in the trenches and let's really bring along J.C. Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer, go to work against Nicholas Petit-Frere. I don't know that that's really necessary during this off date, but you want to run some tackling drills. You want it to be live at some point. You need that because Taraja Mitchell's been through this for a long time. He's in that however many rep club, 2,000 reps, even without starting on the practice field. It wasn't going to be that important for him, but much as we've talked about C.J. Stroud and being through 5-6 games, I mean, Cody Simon is doing this for the first time. Tommy Eichenberg is doing it for the first time. And anybody who hasn't watched or made a judgment about him against Tulsa, pay attention in the last few weeks. That guy is really coming along at linebacker. And then obviously Steel Chambers, where we've mentioned before that this was the position that he maybe should have played all along, but it doesn't matter. He made that choice and he only started it in August. So that's now 2.5 months of practice. So those can be significant for him. They're not 3-4 days that he didn't have in April or March or last year. So he can probably still get a lot out of those as he's looking to get more comfortable and grow. And you're seeing that progress already. And then somebody else I didn't even mention with the health, he fits into both of these conversations, is Palaie Neoteote. He's got to be healthy and comfortable. That I think there are a lot of examples from early in his USC career where he looked like a 5-star linebacker. And he hasn't had a chance to really show that. But that's another thing that Ohio State could potentially put into the mix as they go down the stretch. So really, to me, I think it's about reps, about comfort, about teaching, about fundamentals, all those buzzwords for coaches. That off date at linebacker, it's the position when we went into the season saying, here's the most questions. Then there were those defections in the middle of the season, but they're starting to come out of it. And that's the group I think that really will determine how good this Ohio State team can be, because they still only need to get a couple stops a game, which sounds really easy, but you still have to get that job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that a linebacker core that, after those 2 defections a couple of weeks ago, and like we said, some of the problems they had going into the season, just deciding on who their best 2 or 3 guys were, and clearly 2 guys who were left out of that really got upset. Now they're no longer with the team by hook or crook. I think one was by hook and one was by crook, but I digress. But then how it could actually be getting better as this year goes on is crazy, especially with Neoteote. I always say Neoteote because it's easy for me to remember it that way. And then, I promised you a story about Steel Chambers, and I'm going to come up with. I just wanted to get a little bit of space between you and that the really cool thing I like to watch every week, the Buckeye Q with Zach Boren. Breaking down guys, why they're better, why they're getting better, why they're getting worse, whatever. He had a really good one. You and him had a really good one about Steel Chambers last week. And I'll just say ditto to a lot of what was said there. And it's just amazing to watch that guy. I mean, I don't want to jinx him, but this is a guy that's clearly playing on another level each week. He's getting a little bit better. And you could see a guy that was a running back in the spring for Ohio State, still in that run for glory, possibly being considered for all Big Ten by the end of the year, the way he's coming on, because he looks so much like a real linebacker. It's crazy, isn't it?
It really is. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
We've all said that this could have happened earlier, maybe should have happened earlier. Doesn't matter. He couldn't have made a successful transition to that position without buying into it. And when he did, was up to him. But once he made the decision is all that really matters. I don't know that it would have been fair to even say, hey, in 6 weeks, Steel Chambers, we know you can do this. We think you're going to be good at it. You have to lead Ohio State in tackles in a Big Ten game in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a hard position. When Zach starts talking about that on Buck IQ and the things that you have to process to play that spot, it's not as easy as he likes to make it sound with read and react. There is a lot of instinctual stuff that has to happen, and Steel Chambers has that. It's important. But, the schematic stuff, and if somebody in front of me jumps out of this gap, what's the right way to fill it? How do I handle that? Which block? There are so many things to process there. It's not easy to learn. And so that's why I say the last week for the off date with him could still be really relevant, because he's still just learning this stuff. He wasn't splitting time last year or the year before learning both.
Yeah.
And there may be some things that he feels naturally about, okay, well, this is what happens when I was a running back. Maybe that's what I would set up a linebacker this way or whatever. But he wasn't learning Ohio State's defensive scheme. He wasn't learning what Al Washington wants to coach fundamentally. He wasn't watching film of Indiana to try and figure out what keys he's going to be reading. All that stuff is still going to be new for him. But the way he's handled it in such a short time is very, very impressive. And I just think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. But I've always believed, I've watched enough sports I'm 67, over the last 59, 60 years to know that a lot of stuff, I even played, backyard football and baseball with guys. Some guys are just instinctual, about playing certain games, and they know where to go. Just like my son, man, he was a natural center fielder. Of course, God would make him a natural center fielder on a sport that I'm not really a big fan of watching on a long time basis. But he would go crack of the bat, and Corey was off going for the ball when he was 9 years old. It made no sense. And but certain guys are like that. And then you add in a little bit of knowledge, like Steel Chambers is getting from week to week. It's crazy how much you can clearly see. And then you add on top of that the fact that he's a former running back with running back speed. You got something there. That piano player, I talked about him looking like he was playing a keyboard there when he was talking to us post game a couple of weeks ago, kind of moving his head. Hopefully he went back and watched that, but he clearly had a song in his head. But the main thing was he's that real first linebacker you've seen this year that can go from the top of the piano to the bottom of the piano. 53 and a third yards. He's covering all of it. In one form or fashion, he's getting to the ball, and that is so huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that Ohio State adding Steel Chambers into that mix gives them a little bit closer, much more closer, I guess, to what they had a year ago with those four veteran guys that,
yes,
they all did things a little bit differently. You weren't going to count on Justin Hilliard to play 70 snaps of defense. He had a clearly defined role, and he was really good at when he was out there. Steel Chambers has that athleticism that's, I think, different maybe than the other three guys. Cody Simon is very, very athletic as well. And Taraja Mitchell, he's going to go, and Tommy Eichenberg, those guys are going to stuff everything inside the box. Pretty sharp guys who like to go hit somebody. They do that well. And then if you've got, maybe some more versatility with Simon and Steel Chambers, then that expands that toolbox for you defensively if you're Ohio State. And the same thing is true with what they're trying to accomplish there in the secondary, whether that's with Marcus Williamson or Lathan Ransom or Cameron Martinez. We talked about this earlier in the year, and I guess we were critical of it, and I think there was reason to be. They had all these pieces and all these ideas for how to do it, but they weren't taking it one step at a time. So they were clearly defined roles that guys were comfortable with, and then from there, if you wanted to start mixing in matches, potentially you could.
Yeah.
But now you're starting to maybe see some of that come to fruition. Part of it is with what you've talked about with the two high safeties and Bryson Shaw being more comfortable maybe in that role. Ronnie Hickman. Just none of these guys were really ready for graduate level football in September, and I think they tried to skip steps, and now they're growing and learning and taking it like college students and getting better at as they go along. And I think that's going to pay dividends late in October, in November, maybe December. That's the part that you're talking about with off week, middle of the season. Look at what you know what you have now. The coaching staff can maybe tinker and expand if they want, but all these other guys, they would have gone through that and be like, okay, well, here's what we did in the first 6 weeks. Here's where we got better. Here's where it can still grow. Oh yeah, now that makes sense to me. I didn't get that a month ago. That's all changing, I think, for them.
Yeah, and it's funny. I always equate everything. And my analogies go to either race cars or aviation, fighter planes. And the thing about Ronnie Hickman, I just keep reminding people, he's like having that heat-seeking missile in the back of your defense, who goes to where the heat is. And that's the best way of, especially when he ends up in that double high safety, that two high safety look occasionally with Bryce and Shaw. And, we're seeing Lathan Ransom back there and some other guys, but the way they kind of mix and match that little thing is just interesting to me, how they got back to basics, but they are still playing some games with people. And you got to think those games will even get more complicated. Not that they've had a week to work on some things, a week to let people kind of rest up also. And I'm just curious to see how that goes, down the stretch, because they're going to need all the heat-seeking missiles they can get, right, when they go against this gauntlet they're going to run here in the next 6 weeks.
Yep, and that's the beauty of it, is that all this stuff that we've talked about, we knew that the 4-week stretch, they were most likely going to win and probably win comfortably in all of them. And it would be tempting to overreact and say that everything was fixed. I think the mile markers that they passed were significant and deserved to be checked off. But now the rest of this destination, it's going to be on an incline, and the games get bigger, the stakes get higher, all that stuff. The quality of competition is going to get better. So we're going to see if it's for real in the next few weeks. I think right now, if I put my money down on it, and based on what I've seen from the rest of the Big Ten, that Ohio State will get through these next 6-7 weeks and raise another trophy. But now is the time that they'll have to go out and prove it, and we'll have a lot more information at our fingertips to work with.
Yeah, boy, I'm not gonna. There's a big weekend coming. The next weekend. Obviously, Ohio State's got to get past Indiana. At Indiana, primetime game, no doubt about it. Indiana is smarting from the way it had a shot last year to upset Ohio State and couldn't quite get it done in the second half when Ohio State, Justin Fields, everybody associated with Ohio State kind of relaxed after taking that big halftime lead. They can explain it any way they want, but when another team just keeps throwing haymakers and you've kind of let your guard down a little bit, that's what can happen to you. Ohio State was able to escape that game. I'm pretty sure Indiana is not as capable as it was this time a year ago with Michael Penix Jr. Even if he gets to play against Ohio State, is he going to be the same Michael Penix Jr. that was throwing those darts in the second half against Ohio State last year? I don't really see that being the case. But yeah, the next weekend with Ohio State hosting Penn State in prime time, 7:30 on ABC, and then earlier in the day, Michigan and Michigan State going at it high noon in the Fox big game of the week. That's really going to set the tables for the last 4 weeks of the Big Ten East race. And it's funny how you kind of look forward to the next week more than you do this one. And of course, sometimes that can bring a little catastrophe if you're not being careful, right?
It's the way college football works. But
I know.
Shaping up to be a quiet weekend on paper, you're still going to want to tune in. You're going to see something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, like Alabama was looking forward to playing at Mississippi State, and stubbed its toe at Texas A&M. Is it kind of what you're talking about right there?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Hey, last thing, my buddy Dennis Dodd, he's a friend of the show. He's been on my show a few times, but as we record this on a Monday afternoon for this podcast for this week, he put out a tweet middle of the day. And sometimes tweets, kind of let you into the way a guy's thinking. Sometimes tweets, you get the idea, lets you into the way a guy's thinking. You might be thinking, I'm going to stir the pot here a little bit, And he listed his top 7 players for the Heisman in a halfway Heisman hype, he said. He said, number 1, Bryce Young, Alabama. Number 2, Matt Corral, Ole Miss. Number 3, Jordan Davis, Georgia. Number 4, Kenneth Walker III, Michigan State. Number 5, Caleb Williams, the new quarterback at Oklahoma. Number 6, Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh. And number 7, Tanner Mordecai, SMU. Who's missing? Who's missing off that list?
Well,
Awesome.
CJ Stroud.
This is a guy that's missing off that list who, when he's played, even when he got beat, has put up big numbers, huge numbers, and resulted in a lot of touchdowns for Ohio State, responsible for, thrown for, more than a mile already. His name is CJ Stroud, who's going to be in the running for the Heisman Trophy if he keeps up his current pace, or if he even falls off a little bit from his current pace. He's directing the, at least going into last week, the number 1 offense in the country, total offense. Is that a slip by our friend Dennis Dodd?
I think that he's wrong. I will say that. But everybody gets to cast their own ballots and have their own opinions. I think right now, more than any other time I can remember, I'm not trying to use any recency bias here, but there are some people that are putting Ohio State at number 21 on their ballot. There's this Heisman poll that seems to be ignoring everything that not only CJ Stroud has done, but also Travion Henderson.
Yeah.
Vegas clearly disagrees when it puts out the gambling odds for guys that are most likely to win the Heisman right now. It doesn't really match up very well with Dennis's list, and that's fine. If we all agreed on this, none of us would have any jobs because it would be really easy and everything would be black and white. But that seems to be ignoring the reality of CJ Stroud. When you have rankings that are as nonsensical as that, when this team, yes, they lost a game. Everyone with eyes can tell that this is a national title contender. Will they win one? I don't know. They're going to have to play 7 times before they could get to that point to prove it on the field. I can guarantee that if the college football playoff rankings were out right now, they wouldn't be number 21. So, I just feel like there's a lot. Ohio State's fan base is so big, so passionate, and they pay attention to all of college football and not just the Buckeyes, that there just seems to be this Mark May type thing going on again with multiple people. There's like, you know what? This will be much easier for me. It happened in the offseason too. Remember Tim with Ryan Day, not a top 20 coach. Like, it's like, you know what? I'm going to slip this one in there, and I'm going to see the attention come in, roll in, the page, the clicks, all that come in. And I'm not saying that Dennis did that in this situation. I just feel like that's been happening more frequently because Ohio State is going to always be quick to defend their program, which they should.
Yeah. I could see somebody putting CJ Stroud 4th or 5th or 6th, but I mean, not even on that list. That list may go on farther than that. All I saw was 7. I guess that's my point. And then you got Kenneth Walker III coming off an 83-yard game. Clearly, he can be neutralized. I mean, you know what I mean? And everybody who's going to play Michigan State from now on is going to take a page at least, or maybe a chapter out of Indiana's defensive playbook and try to, it wasn't 83 yards on 8 carries. It was 83 yards on, I think, 24 carries. Michigan State kept trying to get him involved and kept failing or get him involved big time. And so, that's why, in this age, when you pick a running back, when you put a running back, I mean, I'm reluctant to put Travion Henderson in that running. I think he's been outstanding, but he's not going to get the touches. He's not going to get the chances to be the outstanding offensive player that CJ Stroud is going to get in this offense. As you well know, having covered this offense for these many years, this offense is about featuring the quarterback and what he does best, whether it's running and throwing, whether it's throwing and maybe running, whether it's throwing and barely running, which is the case with CJ Stroud. It's just from year to year, it changes, but it's the quarterback who gets the most chance to really shine. I know J.K. Dobbins, really came on. Ezekiel Elliott really came on. They came on really late in those seasons for the most part. You know what I mean? When the Heisman voting's all done and when Ohio State's really got you set up for the haymakers and like a boxing match. And so, yeah, I agree. But anybody that's voting Ohio State number 21 on their official ballot, at the moment, that person should be revisited as a bona fide official voter. Do you agree?
Yes. And look, I've said this with a lot of, even the college football playoff rankings, they're fun and they're debate. I think that I'm not suggesting that we should make college football less fun. Like, some people's opinions are going to be out there on a limb. They're not always going to be right. I would hate to eliminate that part of it because that's what's always fueled the passion in the sport. And I don't want to rain on any of that parade. I feel like it's targeted.
Yes.
Discourse that
you don't believe it. You don't want to believe that sometimes, but then you see it and you go, well, what else could it be? What else could it be? You're talking about a team that is still the number one team in the Big Ten, has lost one game by a touchdown in a strange game, but by a touchdown, deserved to lose that game based on the way they played defensively and really offensively at certain times, but to the team that's probably going to win the Pac-12. You know what I mean? They didn't lose to a 2-loss team coming out of nowhere. That's the part. It's like, what is their axe to grind,
I don't know. They weren't penalized for their loss the same way that Alabama was or wasn't. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. There's still a great
example.
The great thing, Tim, is that there are 6 weeks of the regular season left. There's a championship weekend, and more often than not in this sport, it does sort itself out on the field. Sometimes in the way that you least expect it, sometimes in the way that you do expect it. And this stuff will, the stuff from happening in the middle of October, by December 5th or 6th or whatever it is this year, it won't matter. And it'll just be a memory of, were we really talking about Tanner Mordecai winning the Heisman? Where did that come from?
Yeah. But you know what? He is having a hell of a year. I give it up to him. And, look out. Here comes SMU, right?
For now.
Yeah. Hey, last thing, speaking of that, University of Cincinnati, the Fighting Fickles. Dude, the state of Ohio has 2 teams in the top 5. Crazy. We're living in crazy times. And Luke Fickell's team looks better now than it did when it beat Notre Dame. I know it's all about who you're playing, and competition is what makes fights. But there's no doubt Luke Fickell has a special team. Agreed?
Absolutely. And they're not really going to have – it's the same deal as Ohio State on paper right now, that there's nobody in their league that should beat them. And they have to – and of all people, Luke Fickell's pretty well equipped to handle this, to fight off complacency and keep them motivated. And he's got, his own right-hand man, just like Mickey Marotti, a protege down there, and Brady Collins. Those guys will keep them locked in, I would assume. Now, anything can happen in college football, but it's hard to see that team losing right now. That defense is going to show up every single week. And, the offense wasn't flawless in the first month of the season, and people were wondering a little bit about, is this quarterback worth all the hype and draft talk, and could he be a Heisman candidate? It wasn't perfect, but man, he's coming along, and he's certainly good enough to win a lot of games for them. And so it's setting up for could be an interesting Selection Sunday if you spin things forward the way that they could go. I know that I got asked about that on Monday morning on the radio show here with Bishop and Laurinaitis. Like, does Ohio State need to be worried about Cincinnati? I don't know that you worry about it.
Yeah.
You can't. There's nothing you can do about it. It's hard to imagine both of them being in the playoff, but both of them have so much football ahead of them. There's not a lot of value to, I think, worrying about doomsday scenarios.
Yeah.
Like I just said before, with all that other stuff, this sport does tend to work itself out generally pretty neatly. Not always, but Luke Fickell, another person, like, I feel good for him. That wasn't an easy lift. And there were people that doubted him after 2011, but he has shown that he has the chops to do that better than almost anybody in the country, in my opinion. He is a phenomenal coach.
Yeah, they're just playing on such a level now, offensively and defensively. I mean, just such a confident defense out there running around and creating havoc. And then Ritter, I mean, quarterback is playing extremely well and across the board there offensively. It's just it's kind of like fun. I mean, fun to watch them. I mean, they should have beaten Notre Dame more than they did, I mean, at Notre Dame. And so we'll see where that goes. Hey, last thing before we get out of here, you didn't know this guy, but passed away last week, and it kind of went under my radar for some reason. A guy knew extremely well at the Columbus Dispatch, a longtime columnist, was brought in from the Louisville Courier Journal, kind of shook things up in the sports writing world in Columbus when he did in the early 80s. Dick Finland, he passed away. It was in his 90s. Was a pretty good friend of mine, at least when we were working together and stuff. I always liked going places with Dick Finland. And he was the guy, the first columnist to really come into Columbus, because he came in from, out of town, even though he was originally had a job in Columbus way back when, but came in from Louisville and didn't see the sacred cows like a lot of people did, and proceeded to butcher them on occasion, the sacred cows, and really caused some consternation, not only sometimes with Ohio State fans and others, because he also praised them as much as anybody too, but consternation within the building at the Columbus Dispatch where I used to work, and got him in. I don't know if hot water is the right term, a hot tub, let's put it that way. Made some people tried to make life uncomfortable for him on occasion, but he stuck to his guns always and kind of retired early because he wanted to be with his wife, Bobby, when he could still walk around and have a good time and travel, et cetera. And he passed away over the weekend. And I was reminded, I even put this story on Twitter. He and I covered the 1984 Olympics together out in Los Angeles. And we, budget constraints, et cetera, we shared the same hotel room, which was kind of funny because it was almost like one of those things where somebody, sleeps while the other guy's working. That's the way it felt like to me. But I would come in every night. I wrote 5 or 6 stories every day, and he wrote a column. You know what I mean? And his nickname was Daylight Dick because he always liked to get his column done before sunset. And he really didn't like late starting games at all. He would not probably have survived is not the right term, but he probably would not have gotten along well in this primetime era because we're about to see 2 Ohio State primetime games in a row. But bottom line is I reminded people I would get home really late from covering some nighttime event in the Olympics. And we were an afternoon paper then, so you'd write, into the morning and be done. And I would get in the bathroom sink, there'd be the remnants of one of those little plastic mesh 6-packs with 2 beers left in it every night with ice that was almost gone. But he looked after me even, and I appreciated him. Of course, I knew where the other 4 went in rapid succession. Kind of like you, man. He didn't meet a beer he didn't like, and so yeah. But Dick Finland, man, I mean, he was sort of a kind of like you're working with a little bit of a hero there. He was a much older. Yeah, he was a lot older than I was. I used to call him old man all the time. Now I'm 67, feel bad about doing that. But but he was one of those guys that just he would smile at you and then cut your throat. You know what I mean? Kind of guy. I mean, he didn't take getting bullied by any stretch by anybody, including his bosses. And just was a stand-up guy. I guess that's the nice guy and stand-up guy is the best way of describing him. But Dick Finland, RIP, man, it was great to have known you. And also, any of your last words you want to throw in there now? I don't know what bandana you're going to be wearing this week. Are you you don't wear a bandana when you cover Ohio State, but when you cheer for the home team, you definitely do when it comes to the crew and the Blue Jackets.
Don't think that I'll have any use for a bandana this week, as Liberty had never seen one of those for a national team game. She hadn't been alive for Allie and I to go to a qualifier, so she thought those were pretty cool. So Saturday she wanted to be my twin, and she had just actually got one, a game of black and yellow one from the Nordica a few weeks ago. She didn't know what they were for. She just thought they were kind of like a towel. I said, well, we can be twins if you're ready for one. So that was her first first bandana going on, and she saw Daddy with his last week, and she thought that was really cool. That part is fun, Tim. I know you've been through this, but to pass on the fandom and see them starting to, really enjoy all the stuff that goes with it is really cool. I hope it keeps growing with her. And like I said, like Columbus has a bunch of opportunities for her. So
yeah,
I'm glad that she's liking it.
Yeah, I feel so. Speaking of fandom, my middle kid Corey, he and 10 or 11 of his friends were looking forward to this for like 3 or 4, 5 weeks. They got tickets for the Cleveland Browns Arizona game, the match of the 2 Oklahoma Heisman winners, and was so excited about going to that game. And things imploded on him quickly there in the Brown Stadium. But he's a big fan. He's a big boy, and he understands. Especially being a fan of all things Cleveland for some reason, he understands there's more heartache than joy, covering or watching a lot of those teams. But he enjoyed that immensely. And like I said, I tweeted a picture of you guys, you and your wife and your dad, by the way. Bless your heart getting to go to a big-time game like that with your dad, man. It's a cherished memory also. But, I thought Allie looked like she was posing for the Statue of Liberty, which is the name of y'all's kid in that one picture. And I thought that was priceless. I thought you'd at least get a kick out of seeing yourself on the big screen.
Yeah, so we don't usually get quite that close because traditionally the American Outlaws supporters section and the Nordeca are general admission. And, because of the way things work and organizing and this new era that we all live in, it was a seating. I had no idea that we were in the 5th row right behind the goal. So the camera arm, and my dad was like, trying to keep moving around. It would be in the way. It would drop down, and it's close to you, so it's blocking everything at the far end of the field a little bit. It's like, we don't want to be on TV. Like, it is cool, and everybody saw that. Like, we love supporting the U.S. soccer, and if that maybe gets somebody else down the road into it or want to try it, cool. All the better. I'll be happy to buy them a beer to come out at some experience down the road so they can get into soccer. But the same offer for you, Tim. But that part was like, our phones are blowing up, and my dad pulls out his phone to take a picture because the U.S. is coming down there to celebrate with the supporters section. Yeah, and that's what my sister saw. I was getting mine out too. She's like, you guys, you just can't put your phone down. Yeah. I don't know that the camera's on, and I'm just trying to celebrate the end of the game.
Well, when they first got on you, man, you and Allie were singing along with the crowd and clapping. I mean, you were into it. I got to give up to you. And your dad reminded me of me because he's trying to figure out how to make his camera phone work.
My mom was a little bit worn out, so it was the 4 of us there. Yeah. So she was sitting down next to Allie, just out of camera shot there. But that was really, as you said, like, obviously I enjoy the fact that I'm doing this with Liberty. And to have, my dad was a lot like you for a long time, wasn't into soccer. And as we got into it, he would watch it. And I've gone to a number of qualifiers and Gold Cup games with him. And now he's really, into it, or at least does a great job of pretending to be. But I think that it's legit. And so those things are special, I'm glad that we got the opportunity to do that. And as we sit here and think about, the difficult stretch that our buddy Jeremy Birmingham is going through, like,
yes,
I'm glad that I had that opportunity, and I hope to get as many more as possible. But that one was pretty special for us.
No kidding, man. Special moments. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank my friend, cohort, Awesome Ward, for joining me again on the Tim May podcast. And this time a week from now, we're going to be back. We're going to be talking about Ohio State, Indiana. These podcasts kind of get into like post examination and previewing games in the middle of this season, because really there's so much interesting stuff to talk about in both respects. And of course, I'll have another special guest on, a man of national repute, next week to help preview that Penn State game. Hey, awesome. Are they calling it, instead of white out the night, or calling it fright out the night? What are they going to call it on Saturday night in Ohio Stadium? What do you think? Fright out the night to me sounds like a perfect little pun.
Sounds better than Scarlet Out.
Yeah, Scarlet Out makes no sense. Hopefully it won't be that. Gray out, I don't know, man. But anyway, now I've lost my way. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, for Awesome Ward, this is Tim May. We'll see you then.